What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and this is part 4 of my reviewing and ranking David Bowie's albums. I'm doing them in the groups of box sets that he has released over the past decade. So this is the Loving the Alien box set, which just features 3 albums that much maligned sort of 1983 through 88. I'm gonna talk about Let's Dance Tonight and Never Let Me Down. I'm gonna review those 3, and then when I'm done reviewing those 3, well, I'm gonna rank them. And then at the end, when I do all of his albums, I will combine all the rankings together into one big list. How did we get to David Bowie from Frank Zappa? Well, for this group of albums, Tina Turner is on one of them. Wasted, her presence wasted on one of them, but she is on one of them. And she was also on Overnight Sensation, a recent Frank Zappa 50th anniversary re-release. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to talk about the 3 albums, and that's about it. So let's get on to that 80s period of David Bowie. Number 3 out of these 3 is Tonight, his 16th studio album that came out in 1984. This was his follow-up to the huge Let's Dance. And out of the albums I've listened to so far and ranked up to this point in David Bowie's career, I would say this is the worst. It's maybe got 2 songs that are better than anything that's on his debut album, but his debut album you could chalk up to Of the Time and A New Artist, and it's not that horrible. It's more of an interesting curio, where this at times is just kind of bad. It's got 2 songs that are kind of good. The opening track, Loving the Alien, has a good vibe about it. Kind of sets up like a good sort of mid-tempo to slow, weird, spacey atmosphere. It feels like it's supposed to be like maybe a bigger station-to-station type thing. Doesn't quite develop that way, but it's interesting. It's not a bad song. And then it's got the absolutely fantastic Blue Jean, which was the hit single. When it drops midway through the second half, it's just this breath of fresh air. Reminds me of a song that every time I hear this, and maybe it's because I think there's marimba in this and on a couple other tracks, reminds me of Frank Zappa's 1977-78 Rockin' Teenage Combo, the Shake Your Booty Band with Ballou and O'Hearn and Bozio and that group. It seems to me like that band could have done Blue Jean live. Some of the rhythms, some of the vocal performances, I don't know. I like that song. Blue Jean's a really fun song. There's one more other fun song. There's a cover of an old song, like a Lieber Stoller song called I Keep Forgetting. Definitely has an Elvis vibe in there. It's kind of a fun throwaway number. It's not a bad song. But everything else on here is just, it's not that good. Don't Look Down is reggae. No. Tonight, which wasted Tina Turner's vocal performance. Can't tell if it wants to go for a Bob Marley vibe or a Jimmy Buffett vibe, and it's kind of lost somewhere in between. Doesn't know what island it wants to land on. Not a good song. Neighborhood Threat and the closing Dancing with the Big Boys just kind of remind me of generic, like Loverboy type hard rock, and not dissing Loverboy. I'll work for the Weekend anytime. I'll turn me loose. There's some good Loverboy tracks out there, but this is like these are like Loverboy tracks that maybe didn't make the album, though of course Bowie's voice is always good. Yeah, it's just either bad stuff or forgettable stuff. But then there's a track on here. It's the 3rd track on side A. It's called God Only Knows. And every time I play this album or I look at this album, I say, oh, God Only Knows. That's interesting that he called it that, because there's a Beach Boys song called God Only Knows. And I'm sure Bowie knows that. Why would he give this the same name? And then apparently my brain makes me forget the fact that it actually is a Beach Boys cover. So I'm listening to the album and then it starts to play. I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds, oh my God, it is. He did cover God Only Knows. No. Again, another example of his horrible choice in covers. One of the greatest songs ever. I'm not dissing God Only Knows. It's a perfect creation, but it's a perfect creation. Don't mess with a perfect creation. And if you're going to mess with it, don't do whatever musical travesty this is. Like if Bowie was sitting there making something like Low That would have been weird. Or Station to Station, or Ziggy Stardust, or anything, even Scary Monsters. Like, you know what? This album could use a God Only Knows. Then you're thinking, okay, maybe he pulls it off because everything else on those albums is like perfect. So maybe he pulls it off. But to put it on this, it's just, this will always have to be at the bottom of the list because of the God Only Knows cover. Yet another example of how sometimes his choice of covers is horrible. That's my number 3 for this, and it will probably end up somewhere near the very bottom of the list when I combine all the lists. On to number 2, but that's Tonight by David Bowie. My number 2 out of this group of 3 is his 17th album, Never Let Me Down. This came out in 1987. It's still got bad production. I mean, the drums still sound horrible, and it still has a horrible 80s, just doesn't sound like a band at all. Sounds like a bunch of musicians just playing into a computer, and it's just horrible sound. But it's not that bad of an album. And it's got some actually kind of good moments. And it's got an example of Bowie just being way too Bowie and trying way too hard to be artsy and weird and kind of failing, but at the same time, making what might be the best song on this album. The album kind of gets bad as it goes on. I think the first half and just maybe the first 60% of it is the strongest, and then it just kind of flails out at the end. The opening Day In, Day Out kind of reminds me of something like a Eurythmics type, Would I Lie to You type. He's going for that type of energy, rockin' type energy. Doesn't really commit enough to make it all that interesting. It's not that good of a song. Peter Frampton is the guitar player on this album. And while I don't think Frampton's bringing anything necessarily all that amazing or great or like, oh my God, you got to hear this. Every time he plays guitar, including on Day In and Day Out and throughout the whole album, his rock energy that he's bringing, which is kind of just a straightforward rock energy, it's a refreshing sort of injection into sort of the David Bowie, musical whatever. It doesn't sound like Fripp, doesn't even sound like Alomar, doesn't sound like Ronson. It's a new kind of generic. I mean, I don't really know what stands out about Frampton's guitar playing. It's not bad. It's not amazing, but it's needed and it works. And that's one of the things I like about this album is just that sort of commitment to the guitar energy. Definitely not as sort of like distinct as what Stevie Ray Vaughan would bring on Let's Dance, but it's still got some really good moments. Time Will Crawl, kind of a slow mid-tempo song that kind of works. The second song, Beat of Your Drum, kind of a forgettable song. The title track, Never Let Me Down, is kind of pretty fantastic. His vocal performance on that, he's going for this sort of higher register, but there's also softness about it, and it's a really, I don't know, it's kind of a good song. It's one of the attractions of this album. Zeros has a really nice ending that kind of just rides this kind of groove for a while. So we groove out at the end, so it ends strongly. Not a great side A, maybe 2.5 good songs, but the 2.5 good songs are pretty interesting. Then we start with side 2 and we get one of the weirdest, coolest things he's ever done, followed by arguably one of the worst things he's ever done. Opens up with Glass Spider, around which he built an entire tour. It's got some narration about this glass spider and blue eyes that make it look almost human. And then we go into this weird, futuristic, weird dance, funk pop thing with these weird backing vocals that remind me of Portugal the Man. And it's weird and it's over the top and there's way too many different competing elements, but yeah, it somehow works and it's somehow just a fascinating train wreck of a David Bowie slice of misdirected genius. Yeah, I'm giving Glass Spider major props because that's followed by one of the worst things he's ever done, Shining Star, Making My Love, which includes a rap in the middle of it. He's not the one rapping. Mickey Rourke is doing a rap in the middle of this song. Mickey Rourke. And his rap kind of makes Blondie's rap in Rapture kind of sound like Andre 3000 or Kendrick or somebody with like a ridiculous flow. It hurts my heart just to hear it. Yeah, it's bad. And the album kind of never recovers from that. New York's in Love kind of reminds me of Huey Lewis and the News. I mean, Bowie, you just did an entire 3 albums a while back out of a city, and you not once said Berlin is so cool, but we all feel Berlin in those songs. Like, you don't have to like declare that you loved it. We felt your love through the music, or we felt whatever you were experiencing. Now we got a song called New York's in Love where you're just pandering, and I can see the horn players from the Tower of Power like dropping in behind Huey Lewis. It's just, nah, I just can't. And the rest of the album, just no. Again, we get some Loverboy hard rock, and yeah, another collaboration with Iggy Pop that just doesn't work. Bang Bang does nothing for me. But yeah, it's got its moments on the first half. It's got a deliciously weird Glass Spider. But for the most part, it's a back of the pack overall David Bowie album. That's my number 2, Never Let Me Down. And my number 1 album from this mid-'80s David Bowie period is Let's Dance, the huge mega hit that made him an international whatever he became. 15th studio album, came out in 1983. Yeah, this was all over MTV, all over the world back then. Was the first Bowie album. No, I might have about changed his one Bowie before this. But yeah, it was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. And it's a really, really good album. It's not a perfect album. There are probably 3 tracks I kind of could do without. But they're not bad. They're just 2 of them I think are kind of throwaways, and one of them is just kind of maybe a disappointment. But the stuff that's not bad on here is pretty stupid fantastic. And whether you're listening to, the vinyl, side A, or the CD, the first 3 songs are so incredibly good and such perfect creations that like you just have to listen to the rest of the album, because there's going to be at least something that matches that, little snippets. And there are. Opens up with Modern Love. I can listen to that every day. It's gets your energy going. That opening, the guitar part and the drums, the call and response, the fun of it, just everything about it. It's just, Modern Love is like a winner in my book. Then we get, this is how you do a cover. Then we get a cover of Iggy Pop's China Girl, which was like a deep track from an Iggy Pop album, because pretty much most all songs on Iggy Pop albums are deep tracks. This is how you do a cover song, something nobody knows, and you make it iconic. Everything about China Girl, the mood, the slightly sort of Eastern vibe in it, just the dark lyrics, which somehow you would forget about when you think about this song, about swastikas in my head and stuff. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal song. And then that's followed with Let's Dance, which is just so incredibly funky, such a great groove. You get this awesome just funk groove, and then Bowie comes in with that just low register voice. If you've not heard the full 7.5 minute album version, which has more instrumental breaks, has this saxophone battle going on at the end, lets everything breathe a little bit more like that. The single version is good. The album extended version is just a mic drop classic. Great song. The closing, Without You, on the end of side A is kind of a throwaway number, but maybe kind of a breather after the awesomeness of the first 4. The second side, song number 5, is Ricochet, which kind of sounds more in line with something like you'd hear on a Lodger, maybe even a Scary Monsters, if the production was a little bit tweaked, a little bit more chaotic or something. But it's definitely got a weirder vibe to it. It's got this weird rhythm. It's got some really nice saxophone sort of lines thrown in at the end, and rides out this kind of cool groove. So it definitely feels like it's from a couple years earlier. Maybe almost doesn't fit on the album. It's like we're into a whole different world than those first 3 songs, but it's a good song. Then you have another fantastic cover, something called Criminal World, which I think the band was called Metro. It's a cover of some band called Metro, which I think was a band out of England. And this has a really nice, just kind of momentum about it. And it just sounds like if he had recorded this and dropped it in like the 2010 era, it would have been a huge like Bonnaroo hit, indie hit. You would have heard it all over XM radio. It's just got that good sort of like mid or late, whatever that era is, 2010-ish type indie pop vibe that it works. It's a good song. And then the one thing that's the huge disappointment is you get Cat People, which if you had bought this thinking, wow, maybe this is the same version of Cat People from the movie, you'd be really excited. And then you get it and you realize, no, it's not. It's sounds like it's from this era, and the earlier version definitely sounds more late 70s, early 80s before bad production technique took over. It's from the movie Cat People. If you weren't aware, there was a movie called Cat People. I believe it was not a metaphor for anything. They were cat people. But the original starts off all creepy and atmospheric and goes through these different changes, has this little mini epic vibe to it. Yeah, no. This one just kind of way too aggressive, way too much production. It loses its mystery and its like weird midnight cat creeping vibe. Stevie Ray Vaughan tries to inject some guitar in there and tries to save it, but just doesn't. So that's kind of a disappointment. And then the final song, Shake It, has some really, really catchy parts in it, but man, it's just kind of a cheesy, bad song. But I have to admit, it's at this point, I'm like, I don't want to like this, but it's kind of enjoyable in a weird, catchy way. But yeah, it's not a bad album. In fact, it's probably better than most people give credit for because there are some great songs on here. But that is, out of this period, my number one, Let's Dance. Yeah, so that's my ranking of those three. For those of you with the memory of a goldfish, that's what the order looks like. Yeah. Eventually, I will merge that list with the other ones that I've done, and two of those are they're probably going to be on quite different halves of that list. Anyways, yeah, let me know what you think of these albums, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't heard Let's Dance in a while, go listen to it. It really is. Yeah, it's pop. Yeah, it's not. Again, it's the chameleon Bowie now doing the pop thing and like hitting it out of the park. Yeah, good for you, Bowie. All right. That's all I got. Go listen to music, all that kind of stuff. Subscribe, like, share, comment. And yeah, let's dance, people. Let's dance. Talk to you later.